notifications?
Yep, already.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So this audit, presenting both of them, I've got two audits and I just kind of wanted to take you guys through both and a little bit of the background work. If I do it at the speed that I did with the customer, it'd take about 2.5 hours. So I'm going to go through super fast. I'm going to skip slides without any explanation. If you do have questions, maybe just write down the slide title and which brand it was, and we can kind of talk about it at the end, or we can talk about it one-to-one afterwards. So there's two new clients. These are both SFDC audits, so that's CRM. Very different CRMs for both of the clients. Slip is fintech industry, B2B, and a new instance, I say in inverted commas, and you'll find out why I'm saying that in a minute. And Mayorcorp Real Estate is B2C with very established Salesforce usage. They both asked for audits with extra unicorn budget with the intent to make changes after the audit. I'm going to show you a bit of the work behind the decks and then jump into each of the decks. Both brands were very, very anxious to get their audit and asked for previews. During the preview, Mayorcorp completely kind of changed direction. So we went off on a more personalized audit based on what they'd asked for in their preview, whereas Slip kind of stayed aligned to what we were recommending. So that's a more vanilla kind of run through. So I'll do the Slip one first. And I'm going to turn off my video. Sorry. Okay. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. So behind the scenes, just quickly, I obviously went through all of the customer documentation, took a heap of notes on what they're actually planning to do, got to understand the product and the audiences that they were targeting and so on in the background. So I had those notes, and in my previous sessions, I've talked about structure of a business. That's really important to understand beforehand. We then went through on a couple of discovery sessions with the client, went through a heap of questions. So I do have a lot of questions, standard questions that I would always ask around CRM and marketing automation strategy. Go through all of the objects in Salesforce, take a heap of notes, then go through the kind of field review. If there's something particularly different, so on Mayorcorp, they did have some special objects. So there was like a lot more to go through in the field structure and so on in the back end. I basically just do all of that before I even jump into thinking about what needs to be improved or done differently. So I'll just I'll do presentation mode first. Oh. Actually, that won't work, will it? You guys can see everything, can't you? Can you see enough of the presentation, guys? Okay.
Yeah.
Did a bit of a scoring, because as I said with Sleep, it was more the vanilla one. So I did a bit of a scoring system, and there was only really one major piece of feedback. And I also, so during the session, I kind of went through the method we were going to use, but I sent beforehand a slide for them to complete and say what they thought we should focus on. So the system review went through the back end. I recommended they get an admin. There's a heap of admin steps that need to be completed. I went through their users, the audit trail. I noticed there were a heap of password changes, so told them that they need to really get on top of MFA. I also did a bit of an explainer, and I will always do this depending on what I see in the back end of Salesforce. I will always do a bit of an explainer around what they might have missed in the initial training or rollout. And in this case, it was the fact that leads and contacts are one human, that conversion is extremely important between a lead to a contact to reduce duplication in automation. And then the other piece that I will go on and on about, and you guys are going to be hearing a lot about this, is the fact that campaign's the most important object and tie everything together in the Salesforce ecosystem. The opportunity is the financial part to it. An account is the business. So in the case of Slip, then they have a standard business account. That's also one of the first things that I look at is, do they have the right account? B2B would use standard business accounts. Potentially some B2C companies might require person accounts. Yeah, B2B is standard. I also explain what lead means. So when you're talking to marketers, especially, and in the case of SLIP, the marketers were the ones that marketing and sales, but more so marketing, kicked off this review. Talk to them around all the different concepts of a lead. It can get very confusing for people working with Salesforce for the first time with different types of leads, and the concept of business leads can be very, very different to Salesforce leads. So I always explain that. And I also explain that it's an opportunity to think about things differently. Not every time does it have to be a capital L Salesforce lead. Duplicates, one of the most important things to review. I always go in and check the duplicate rules because duplicates break automation. This was where I got very surprised in SLIP, in that they had the instance for over 3 years and they only had 88 leads and 156 contacts. So anyone who has worked in Marketing Cloud, I'm sure would know that we need to have, to use things like Ad Studio, you need to have minimum thousands of contacts. Running journeys, you'd have thousands of contacts. But yeah, 88 humans and 156 email addresses in Salesforce. So I was very surprised around that. Very little usage in the 3 years prior. So that kind of changed the tone of how I presented this to SLIP. I talked about the things that they were doing well, converting, like making sure that they have qualified statuses. I talked about HubSpot not being connected to the CRM. I hoped that there would be data hidden in HubSpot, but there actually wasn't very much at all, and it's not aligned to the current strategy. I talked about converting to the standard objects and some automation that had been built there. So it seems whoever set it up in the first place for SLIP had actually put in place some quite good foundations. So the duplicate rules are excellent. The adding here, when you create an opportunity on conversion, adding the end of quarter date, that's a good move. They didn't have any minimum fields. They didn't have any field validations, and they had a lot of missing data. So see that little screenshot there? They were essentially just names of businesses, but no contacts. So I kind of went on an education piece around how marketing works and the fact that we need to have people to speak to and send emails to and send SMSs to, and to find lookalikes. I'll skip a few of these. You also want to bring the data throughout the system end to end. So say if a company had Pardot, then you would have prospect data that would come into Salesforce, then into leads, then into contacts and so on. Same human, one human. You want to bring that segmentation, the same segmentation that you collect at any step, through each of these human records so that you can keep using that same segmentation on any of your journeys or automation logic. The other piece there, they actually asked us to do, this bit is about record mapping. So if a certain type of lead comes in, you can make it so that the certain type of opportunity is also matched. In this case, they have different lead record types. They have different opportunity record types. So you can actually get those to map so that there's no chance of a sales rep choosing the wrong one. They also, even though they did have 3 different types of opportunity, usually the reason that you would want different record types for opportunity is if there were completely different fields on them. They were used differently, potentially by different sales reps even. In this case, they were all exactly the same and they had a lot of custom fields. Any sales rep who opened up that opportunity would not know which fields to complete and would not complete the fields. So generally what you would want to do if you're going to go down the path of having different record types for opportunities, it would be personalized to the type of either sales rep or the type of customer that would be completing that record and the information needed. So that's a recommendation there, is to set a future date and review that. Again, we need humans connected to accounts in Salesforce, especially for account-based marketing, contacts, especially in B2B. Account roles is what connects contact object to the account object, especially in reporting and a few different places. That also gives a little bit of opportunity for segmentation. So that's definitely something that needs to happen, is applying account roles, key contact roles as well. I also said on accounts, you might want to, for ABM, consider some territory structure or some other segmentation in future. Industry is very common. Out of the box industry fields are available and they were using those. This is like where the red flags came in, the fact that there was lots of account names, company names, but no contact details. So that's where we started to talk about, do you have any data anywhere else, hidden anywhere that we can get into the systems? Let's skip a few of these. Aligning between objects, as I mentioned, simplifying sources, using out-of-the-box sources, and only having complexity within the data if it's based on a operational or a reporting requirement. So aligning those pick lists instead of them being different. And again, taxonomy really, really matters when you're doing report logic, when you're mapping fields from the website through into Salesforce, adding fields on forms. You really have to decide that up front. And this is actually a strategic decision. So locking down taxonomy is the kind of thing that you would definitely talk to the marketing team about. They don't yet have their data coming into Salesforce. So that was one of our recommendations. And then obviously once the data does start to come into Salesforce, there's more opportunities for personalizing those forms, depending on the person that's completing them. Talked a bit about using ratings, merchant tiers, a little bit of an active versus inactive, contract renewal dates, just some of those basic fields that accounts need that are best for account management. Some fields that I don't recommend keeping, like the sales team asked about agreement due dates, kickoff dates and those kinds of things. It's very different based on the way that they use Salesforce. Like I said, I did go through a little bit of a review and also spoke quite a bit to the marketing team and the sales team about how they use Salesforce. Based on how they do use it, I would not recommend adding those fields onto opportunities or onto accounts. I recommend setting recurring tasks. So this is a opportunity for automating the sales process through recurring tasks. You don't always have to do, and this is so important, don't always do exactly what the customer asks. The sales team had some very direct asks in this case, and not like we did implement, like I did recommend that a couple of them go ahead, but not all of them. Just it's awesome to have the opportunity to think about ways to do things that will make their systems work forever, not just like tiny, tiny one-off fixes. I also showed them at the bottom there their own tasks in Salesforce, just how we use tasks. Then data. Skip a few of these. I recommended, importantly, so rather than having different sources, to try the vanilla out-of-the-box sources, and then to also put their campaign naming conventions and their campaign structure into Google Analytics UTMs, collect those as hidden form fields on any of their forms. Also providing thank you pages, all the standard things that we'd recommend, autoresponders with content and then SLAs and so on. One thing this brand slip does have is a lot of amazing explainer content that can be pretty much cut and paste and put into journeys once they get some data to send the journeys to. And then obviously implementing SFDC form handler so that if anyone does come to the website and complete a form, then that comes into Salesforce. And then retiring HubSpot, decommissioning it. They have changed strategy. They were targeting consumers. At this point, they are now targeting businesses, enterprise, SMB only. In that case, since we have recommended they stick with a B2B design of Salesforce, we had to think about what we would do with the consumers. Are we going to bring them only into Marketing Cloud, or should we bring them into Salesforce? I always believe in that single source of truth. Sometimes you have to bend the way that we use the systems a little bit. So in this case, I said, let's bring them in, but do something slightly different, which is a consumer or customer parent placeholder account, and then use the campaign, which is the best object ever, to connect them all together. Most importantly, we want to get any data that they have. They talked about having some data saved on desktops with the sales reps. I said, if you get this plugin, they're on Outlook, unfortunately, which is a little bit more annoying than Google. If you get this plugin, go through all of the emails, all of the conversations, and in one click, connect the people to the accounts. Make sure that you connect them to the right accounts, make sure they've got roles. That's a huge thing. If they had a big Salesforce team, which you'll see that they don't, I think I might have skipped that slide, but there's basically only 3 people that log into the system regularly. But yeah, once they grow their sales team, then having this plugin will really help them keep their CRM up to date and add the people that we need to talk to. Then went through a heap of cleanup. They still have sample accounts when you first set up Salesforce. There's sample accounts, there's sample opportunities. I also talked about for personalization, obviously using all capitals isn't the best for personalization. There's a lot of information you can get from reports. One of the first things I do is I go straight in and do a report on every single object, and then the main connectors between those objects. So if it's contacts and accounts, I'll do a contacts and accounts report, or I might do a campaign member status report. I might do accounts and opportunities reports, especially any cross-object reports. I always bring in important things like last activity that gives you a real view of how the systems are being used. And then any of the most common profiling and segmentation fields like state, city, industry, and so on. I check out how that's being used and if it's aligned to their business strategy. Talked about parent and child accounts. They had only used it for one account, and I wasn't sure if that was strategically correct. Parent and child accounts are so parent business and a child business. It could be something like McDonald's having lots of franchises. JLR might have parent and child accounts where there's dealerships, maybe the children. In this case, they do still think that it was the correct use. So they're going to keep that implemented. I then talked through how we're going to manage, hopefully finding any data throughout their entire company. We talked about if there's any data in the back end of their product. We thought that they had an app that might have had logins or a back end, but unfortunately that's not the case. It's just a component that plugs into third-party partner apps, so there's no data there. We want to make sure, especially for a B2B, that anything that we import into Salesforce, any data that they do find on their desktops, any contact data that's in bulk spreadsheets, contact lists, or so on, we make sure that it's brought into CRM and connected, most importantly, connected to the right account. So there's a new sales rep starting this week that I'm going to work with to make sure that that happens. But yeah, basically, connections within Salesforce between databases are the most important thing. So contacts and accounts have to have the IDs. Then I went through a little bit of preference design. Slip are also doing an SFMC implementation. So this was an opportunity to talk preference as well, which is always about data structures. Talked about the fact separating out transactional versus promotional, making sure that people don't use global unsubscribes. We suggested, seeing as they do intend to use SMS in future, breaking out the channels. Then this is really important for B2B especially. In future, if you have content designed by life cycles and interests, then that is what will drive your dynamic content in future. So what I've recommended, I based it on their marketing strategies. I then broke it down into the groups that they wanted to speak to, but then I put it into consumer front-end facing speak. So the top one, loyalty and experience executives, they intend to speak to the C-suite who have been tasked with managing loyalty at enterprise companies. But I've just made this a kind of content theme so that it can help them both design their campaign content strategy, but also in future their dynamic content strategy, and align that to their segments within Salesforce. The second one, they are interested in closing the loop between retailer and merchant transactions. So that's analytics and insights. That's what they're targeting to potentially. Again, C-suite, maybe CFOs, maybe CIOs, and so on, CTOs. Partners and investors, they, I believe, have gone through capital raises. I believe they have investors. These may be people that are interested in brand content. This could be where you put just the newsletter, for example. These, in the preference management recommendations, would align to publication lists in Marketing Cloud to start off with. At some point, they may become checkboxes in Salesforce as well if you choose to design a preference management object. Also put in there integrators and developers for the partners that they work with, the point of sale systems and merchants and banks and so on. Oh my God, and that typo is still there. That typo has been fixed on the customer side, but I forgot to change the screenshot and that kills me. Okay, so the last one is the customers and app users. As I talked about, they pivoted from a consumer-based strategy to a business B2B strategy, but they do still have a little bit of consumer data, and they may have, at some point, they have done some kind of sessions on how the app works, and they've got some consumer feedback and so on. They may want to speak to those consumers in future. So that's where we would bundle those people up. That would be the end users, the B2B to C consumers using the actual product slip, which is smart receipts, warranty, reward wallets, buy now, pay later progress, and so on. Oh, what have I done? So then, however, so I couldn't actually locate any existing preference centers. So that was obviously one of the main recommendations, is that they need to be able to manage their preferences. They need to be able to choose their segments. And then we'd, in this case, pre-tick. So for anyone who has consented to receive marketing or is not opt out of marketing, we would pre-tick that, all of that content right now, so that we can send, mass newsletters, and then later on we would personalize the dynamic content. This is where I get excited and most people zone out. Campaign structures, that, like I said, that object that underpins the connections between everything in Salesforce. It should also align to budgets. It should also how your actual marketing team, as your team grows, how your marketing team is structured, how your budgets, like your marketing budgets are structured, and so on. And it should align to your customer experience planning as well. Then once that's all decided, and I always say to customers, you can change it once a year if you like, but you lock down your naming conventions and then you use it for an extended period of time, and you bring that hierarchy throughout all of your systems end to end. So from your Google Analytics campaigns into your forms, no matter which form handler you're using, into your CRM, and then all the way through into marketing automation. Put together some recommendations based on their strategy, talked around the UTM and free Google Analytics integration piece. And then I started to kind of come up with some ideas. We will be doing a D2 with them very soon once they've implemented the first few ideas from the audit. But I also was trying to come up with some ideas for ways to get more data. One idea I thought was using Salesforce's security credentials and Cyberati, for example, and then the advanced email capabilities. So I've hidden in here, so video in email means playable. Interactive EDMs is obviously interactive. Interactive educational video is Voodoo. But basically spruiking these as, we have the best email capabilities and we are so secure. Please give us all of your data. And, in a very secure way, trust us to send to your lists. So that was one idea that I had for trying to get data from partners to send to in Marketing Cloud. Another idea that I had was more for positioning. We talked a bit about their category position, whether they're actually fintech, whether they're smart receipts, if they are data link, was another idea that a lot of the investors thought they were, which is connecting data, driving common taxonomy. It's a data nerd investor lingo. But they haven't defined their category. So I was talking to them about loyalty as a category, customer loyalty, potentially having partnerships, targeting executives. My background is I started in SEO and content design 20 years ago. So these are the kinds of things that I do. I will Google a company and I'll say, who are your customers? Then I'll Google that term in relation to the company and so on. In this case, I was thinking about the C-suite, those executives interested in loyalty management and data. We tried in the past to have a chief customer officer that never ever took off. Chief experience officer, if you Google CXO, which is a thing to marketers, but in the rest of the world, it's core lithium. And if you CIO and CMO are owned by a company called IDG, CEO is owned by the CEO Institute. I thought maybe we could try something different, which could be a CLO, and start saying, hey, customer loyalty officer, chief loyalty officer, and really own that term and try and make it a common C-suite term, because it is the focus of a lot of companies at the moment, including Salesforce. So I kind of went through some ideas there. Also talked about line pay, potential opportunities for partnerships. IDG, like I just said, potentially a data partnership targeting CIOs with content and ABM strategies. Talked a bit about ABM. Talked about Domo, who are also in that analytics and intelligence piece, and maybe using events, virtual events or real events that the C-suite attend, trying to get better visualization and access to their business intelligence data, to try and do partnerships to get customer contacts. Then I went to the SFMC stuff. So that's SLIP. I'm just going to go back into Megacorp now. You'll see how, as I mentioned, it is a bit different. Okay, so as I said, Megacorp is real estate, B2C, very, very established. And I didn't just do the object audit in order with them, because with the preview, they said, can you please focus on these few things? Let's skip it through a few. So one of them, which was the big idea, which I believe may have brought them to us in the first place by 8 Squad, was in real estate, once you get to the stage of finance, actually purchasing a house, that obviously shows from a segmentation perspective that you're a pretty hot lead. If somebody didn't have finance but was really excited to get moving, or if they needed to be vetted, their financial position needs to be vetted, they wanted to build an API to send that data off to a partner. So I'll skip some of these. In this case, that was Innovate, and I just talked about ways that they could align the system, how that project would actually work. We could have a trigger. So at the point of the finance savings plan opportunity stage, we could build a trigger at that point, which would ask the sales rep to review the data, send the data across via API to a partner. So that was pretty much what they wanted. We were hoping to get to the next stage of scoping. So I kind of went through how the project would work. I was very excited. I haven't built an API in a couple of years, so I was excited about this project, but unfortunately got to this part and then they said, oh no, we're actually thinking of buying our own finance company, so this will be on hold for now. So that's going to take them weeks and months of licensing. So then we went into the second piece that they said was their priority, which is they have a lot, because it's B2C, the same people might be browsing real estate many, many times before they actually purchase. And they have allowed duplication of leads in the system. They've also allowed duplication of contacts. But what they wanted to do is actually the opposite to normal. Usually within Salesforce, the account owner, so that's the business owner that kind of ties it all together. In this case, person accounts. Usually the person account means B2C. Sorry, I skipped that in the object overview. But see how on the right-hand side, that little purple symbol, if it just has a building, then that means that it's standard accounts. If it has a building and a little person, it means that it's a person account, which means that maybe you're working in a B2C instance of Salesforce. But account is the piece that ties together all of the financial opportunities, which is that crown yellow symbol. They wanted to have any new opportunity created to then become the owner of the account. So this is kind of the opposite to what you would usually do. So we went through a lot of back and forth around, is this really what you want to do and why you want to do it? And do you know that this is the opposite? And it's also important to ask why. And we went through how their reporting and their dashboards worked. The objective was to improve that. And I really had to validate that this solution would help. Again, don't just take what the customer wants and says as gospel. Always try to think about, is this the smartest way to do it? Is it the best way to do it if you've got time, which is why we all need time to think on our clients. Some good things about their system is they have 3 different record types, lead record types. So I talked about different types of records before. In Mayorcorp's case, they have 3 lead record types. One of them has an automatic conversion, which is excellent. That's like the parent group. The other 2 are standard, which again is fine. However, somebody somewhere has been trying to do some very, very complex things, which really didn't work. But it's essentially just added a heap of previous opportunity owners, connected opportunity owners, and just a lot of complexity. Beyond the fact that they did this, which is so much work that has been done, it pretty much doesn't work. And so I took them through into dashboards and into reporting and showed them how the fact that this has been done actually doesn't work. Went through and agreed, as I said, there was a preview. We agreed the steps to take and what we would do next. First, a bulk account cleanup and mass transfer. We had to do this before setting up any automations because otherwise the workflow process builder would error out. We also had to go through, and this is the most important thing, it's always systems, processes, and people. We also had to go through how did this happen in the first place and what's going to happen in future. Make sure you notify anyone who's going to be impacted by these changes within the business, and then find ways to prevent this from going wrong in future. Recommended building an automation using Process Builder, updating the owner of the person account to match opportunity owner ID as agreed. Every single time an opportunity is updated, the owner becomes the account owner, reassigned and updated, only if they're not the same person, and so on. And then went through all the implications to that. So Salesforce is a very, very connected and complex system. And any changes you make on one object will trigger many, many changes, break connections. It will, move contacts. It will move certain contracts, which are all different objects. So it's very complex. So you have to kind of make sure that you've considered those things before making changes like this. And then things like someone somewhere had not updated a part of the system. So we had to define the method and criteria. So that was one kind of mini project for Mayorcorp. Presented these last week, so we're waiting for them to decide next steps. The other one that they wanted us to look into was Facebook lead capture tool. They have an agency that looks after their external advertising. Because they're real estate, they have lots of parcels of land, they have lots of home end land, they have knockdown rebuilds. They're advertising many, many different products at the same time. And they have an agency managing that. They've been having issues with the Facebook lead capture tool. This is so common. My initial thought was it has to be an API and field map issue, but I said I will definitely jump in and have a look. So they were using lead capture for Sales Cloud, which is a free app exchange package. They asked us to look and see what other apps should be considered and understand why the errors had occurred. I also went through all of the documentation, user guide, implementation guide, FAQs, and provided that to the customer. I think behind a lot of this, you might not be able to see, but I do put a lot of links for extra reading for the customer so they can really think about the recommendations as well and make sure that the right decisions are being made. They have created over 388 lead capture forms, only about 46 errors over 3 years' time, which is like 12% errors. And most of the errors hadn't happened since, I found the date, can't remember if it was September or March, but something like that. The app itself, I did a review of it. This app was actually launched between Facebook and Salesforce. It's supported by them, even though they don't announce fixes, they don't document fixes, they don't update and reply to people on the App Store. It's the outages and the errors do get fixed, but usually it scores, 4s and 5s in stars. But then when something goes wrong, like there's a big outage, for example, then there's a heap of one-star ratings given at once. This is the kind of thing that always happens in the App Store. But generally, it's reliable. I went through and found out when the outage happened, and it was September, and it also did align to when a lot of the forms started erroring, and I kind of deduced that it might have been related to some of the things that went wrong at that time that the agency perhaps took a while to fix, which may have led to Mayor Court being unhappy with the entire lead capture arrangement. So again, and I will always throw this in, I located that campaigns were not being used. So if you're ever integrating anything into the Salesforce system, consider how campaigns can be used. In this case, it was a setting that had not been put in place. I also then kind of talked about taking advantage of Facebook's phone number verification. You may be able to see where I'm leading here. I'm actually going to recommend that they don't change the app, but then they do other things instead. One good thing about Facebook is that it does verify and pre-validate phone numbers. So they will pretty much be accurate if there's a phone number. They were talking about the fact that they wanted to start sending SMSs to validate. I also talked about the CRM sync directly within Facebook. Facebook is extremely complex. There are about 4 different admin roles required for you to start managing both ads and leads. You have an admin role on the ad account. You have an admin role on the Facebook business ad account. You have an admin role on the business page. Like there's different roles for budgets, different roles for different types of ads, different roles for businesses, different roles for pages, so on, very complex. Once you can actually log into all of that, get to the CRM piece, sometimes it doesn't work. But that's always worth having a look at, Facebook native. I also looked at alternate apps. A lot of them are the if this then that tools, like Zapier is a very, very famous one. Zapier has an excellent integration with direct SMS, but it still requires an API integration, and you'll have to pay for both. You won't have to pay for Zapier, you have to work with your internal IT team, and you have to pay for the direct SMS. With these solutions, the main point is that a lot of them use webhooks, for example, and automations, triggers, and so on. They require access by the company's internal IT team because, and I've worked in quite a few like SaaS companies, you can't have external agencies with access to your automation tools like this. It's just a huge, huge risk. So it has to be owned by the internal company's IT team, product team often, and they need to commit to implementing it, testing it, and then maintaining it. So there's a lot of work, lots of form. If they change fields and so on, lots of work. Automate.io is similar, but then there were also, and I explained, some changes to operations with the ad agency that would have been needed. Very manual, and the main point is it will still cause sync errors if it's not done properly. Sync Sumo has actually been retired. There's quite a few tools, it just changes all the time. So even finding recommended apps, even within the app stores, it's very difficult. And if you guys know of any that you'd like to recommend for this solution, then please tell me afterwards, which is forms, so leads from Facebook straight into Salesforce and then triggering an SMS, then please let me know. Yeah, so I did put forward, I do think keeping lead capture was the best tool, so the lead capture app that they had, but upgrading it, which I went into, and then a separate SMS send from Salesforce. Obviously, didn't want to go too nuts, but I was aiming towards using SFMC. They don't have a marketing automation platform at this point. I also put in there potentially Ring DNA. So I kind of said, if you want to go full marketing automation, SFMC. If you want to go full sales automation, go Ring DNA. It makes it seem like I'm quite fair in my recommendations. Talked about using regular expressions, validate phone numbers, and formats on fields, correction formulas, and so on. Phone numbers can be very painful. And what you really need to know and talk to your IT team about, and always tell customers this, is what SMS tool will you use? What is the format of the phone number required? And make sure that every single form locks down that format, and don't let anything that's not in that format come into your system. I also talked about, obviously lots of fixes had been made. This is an operational piece. Who was fixing them? Make sure that anything that was fixed is detailed and put into kind of FAQs, because this is being managed by an external agency. If the person leaves that agency, then yeah, whoever was fixing those issues would not know how to fix it. And then forms could start breaking again, and again, MayorCorp are going to be unhappy with their solution. And again, campaigns are not being used. This is the most important SFDC object. Use it. The last piece that they asked us to deep dive into is their house data reporting objects. So they have set up a custom object, and it had some dependencies and relationships with fields on the opportunity object. They, again, wanted this fixed to improve reporting. So the first thing that I do before recommending foundational infrastructure changes in the CRM is actually see what they're trying to achieve. So I looked at a few different ways to change the reports. They were very, very standard out of the box. So I looked at some ways and explained the difference and some kind of learnings, like the difference between the right-hand side and left-hand side, exact same dashboard, just different views, see if they like the views. Also talked about why are we even doing this? Because they have built a dependency relationship between two fields. Home of interest, is it double story, or home of interest, is it single story? However, out of the 159 cases where there's homes, there's only one that could be either double or single. So why do we need this at all? And also that wasn't even a real house type. So basically it kind of wasn't needed. So then I put in some other recommendations for the reporting around, can we just use, is it the fact that you want to know if it's single or double? Then let's put that into the name, use a formula. There could be different ways. There's always implications to changing fields and the way that things work, but it's always worth asking why it's been built that way. It doesn't have to be built the same way, and things can be simplified. Most CRM systems can be simplified. I also talked about designing it, redesigning it, and going back to, they have so many fields. What are they trying to achieve? And what questions are they trying to answer? And how much of this data is populated? And do they need all of it? So I kind of talked about redesigning the data both bottom up and top down. So bottom up would be around the customer experience. Things that the people think about. Their budget probably isn't going to change that much. They might stretch it a bit, but their budget isn't going to change. The number of rooms that they need probably isn't going to change. The size of the land, the shape of the land, how many stories. Is that really, how much is that really going to change? Pretty much if you start from the budget perspective, lots of decisions are made, and a lot of people are researching these kinds of things for a year. So yeah, really think about, make the customer feel heard, remembered, collect the answers to the fields, but you do not need 2,000 fields. Then from the opposite end as well, start from the end goal first and top down. What is the reporting? What is the CMO thinking? What is the CFO thinking? How are budget and channel decisions made? And then this kind of goes into that funnel piece. So I was pitching, because we don't really have a body of extra work with this customer. I was kind of pitching towards that, let's do a D2, let's do some data design. You definitely need more business intelligence, and then try and push it from that perspective as well into a analytics tool. Then here, this would have been what I did actually up front. So this is the vanilla CRM review, now pushed to the end of the audit, because this, like I said, they had their ideas that they wanted to prioritize in the preview. This is now the upfront stuff that I kind of just went through with them as well. Hi admin, how they use it, how they can optimize it. Again, Okta, MFA, talked about with MFA, the fact that they don't have it, why they need to have it. And they have quite a few sales reps, 40 to 50 so on sales reps actively using Salesforce. So talking about that cyberati piece. And then understand, so one example here, they have created a lot of complexity in profiles, organizational role hierarchy, but none of the executives were logging into Salesforce. If you have 49 sales reps, but then no executive view, I just find that very surprising. So maybe a kind of re-engagement piece, maybe it's that data dimensions funnel piece that needs to be repitched internally. Why would you have Salesforce and then not log into it to see how the opportunities are going? I just boggles my mind. Profiles, always doing a cleanup, removing unused apps. They don't have MailChimp, haven't had it for years, and it's still hooked in. And then just the general kind of object overview. They have the most complex deduping methods I have ever seen, and a lot of that is because of the build that they did here, separating out clients, allowing duplicate leads, which anyway, I wouldn't recommend it that way. But they did a heap of complexity, but it's really not being used. They also they then break it. So for example, they have to spend their whole life fixing it and breaking it after allowing duplicate leads. So if anyone ever says they're going to allow duplicate leads, then fight it. They have put in cross-object checks. They've put in kind of lightning checks. They've put in visual force pages. These are all ways to manage duplicates. And then there's a lot of manual labor required to merge duplicates by the sales team. A lot of the sales team don't understand this stuff, and that's why it's kind of never done. Meanwhile, they're still allowing all of the APIs, and they have, they have a couple of quite complex API builds. They're allowing them to create duplicates. So it's kind of like, what is the point? So they then have a lot of complex automations with Campaign Monitor to create leads and then delete leads based on convert, which is good logic. However, the sales team were not using convert. And a heap of things were getting stuck. So the system that they've built, which is well designed by somebody who understood Salesforce and Campaign Monitor, but they didn't take into account how the humans would use it. So the system needs to convert, but nobody's doing it. They're getting stuck in different lead sources and stages. Again, that complexity around second and third owners, which aren't being used. There's a reduction in lead duplication rate this calendar year of like 3%. I asked when they put in those duplication. Just some fixes, like for example, how's a sales rep going to use this field? It's got close proximity to us, I assume, like, schools and shopping centres and public transport and so on, but there's no way to use these fields either in the back end or the front end. So you'd have to change the label and then the data that's pulled into it. And then just talking about an improved recommendation for lead duplication management. So the short-term fix, campaigns, surprise. Setting up campaign integration with Campaign Monitor using Salesforce out of the box. It is a paid app, apparently. I didn't ask for a demo, but also education of the people. So making sure that convert is used, making sure they understand why they have to do it. And then I also recommended an idea, which maybe Pauline will recognize. This, again, like I said, if anyone recommends duplicate leads in a system, then fight it. And we actually recently did that with Rawson. And I'm happy to say they still have duplicate leads, but they're now converting contacts earlier in the process and using the contact record in a less dupy way. So recycling, as always, I kind of changed that idea for MayorCorp and recommended they do something similar. I also suggested that there's other ways to connect between objects. So Pardot, for example, constantly throw in options. And then because the lead numbers may be, numbers may be too high, Salesforce, Marketing Cloud is the obvious next solution recommendation. Talked about redefining training on objects, and then ways to use Salesforce better, that operational piece, not allowing duplicates. And if you do things properly, you can do amazing things like we recommend for other brands, which is one preference center. This is a spectacular thing built by Kathleen and the Rosten team. One preference center, one preference management method. However, if somebody comes from one brand's email, it gets rebranded and that brand is shown up the top. If it comes from a different brand's email, then the other brand is shown up the top. Using one contact record. So again, no duplication. So just kind of recycling ideas. And then, yeah, better ways to use Campaign Monitor is another piece. Integrating standard campaign usage for SFDC, talked about how that could work. Parent and child campaign hierarchy, how to design those, how to use segmentation and dynamic content better when they start to use their marketing automation platform. Just for the background, MayorCorp have been pitched Marketing Cloud a few times, but because they're so connected to Campaign Monitor and because the systems that they've been built have been so complex, they can't even imagine a move to Marketing Cloud yet. So my main pitch is simplifying the system, simplifying the data, starting to use campaigns so that the second they switch off Campaign Monitor, you're pretty much one button, like essentially just building the templates and switching campaigns on, and everything is done in Marketing Cloud side. And then we can start working on, more channels and more automation. I recommended seeing how the fields are being used, aligning campaign structure to channel budgets, and then all of this kind of allows, if you structure your systems end to end based on the customer experience, simplest data and next best action, it enables use of AI. And in future, it will enable use of dynamic and personalized content. And then the last piece is web to lead. This piece this was something they asked us to look into, but I didn't have access to their CMS. I didn't have access to Campaign Monitor. So it's very difficult with Salesforce web to lead. Unlike Pardot, in Pardot you have form handlers. If you make a form and create leads there, you can go into that form and edit it. You can see it, you can edit it, you can change the fields, whatever you like. With web to lead, unfortunately, once it's created, my understanding is that link is kind of output. So you create it once, choose the fields, and then that link is output. However, and then that link, you go and put that onto, your CMS or wherever you need that link, but you can't go back in and edit it in Salesforce. So I think that's a real failing of web to lead. And I know that's why they're better integrating Pardot into CRM so that you can use the form handlers, because it's a million times better. But with that said, it's very difficult to analyze something that you can't actually see the back end. But what you can see is the fact that you've got UTM fields, but no data is coming through, even for things that were collected this month from social media and web. So it's not working, whatever is happening. And then, there's no, I think this is actually an example of ours, but there's no validation. If there was, one of the issues was sync errors. Again, Pardot, if there's a sync error between the form handler and Salesforce, it will tell you exactly which field didn't work. Usually it's because pick lists have changed or something like that, or you haven't, the field's been renamed, or there's a required field that has not been completed and so on. Whereas the way that they've got it set up at the moment, they just know that people have sent in leads that are not syncing without being able to validate that. based on their CMS, like just looking at the code, it doesn't even look like they're actually using the web to lead form. So I'm a bit confused. Not much that I can really help with there unless I have access to the CMS to review it and make recommendations. Yeah, and then at the end, you know, pitch all the kinds of things that we can help with, everything that we do at Datarati. And do you want a dimensions planning workshop? Yeah, so that's kind of what I do. My audit. Any
awesome.
ideas for things to fix or things to do differently? Or yeah, please tell me.
That was so good. Thank you, Kristen. I haven't seen the second one. Obviously, I was in the slip one, but so detailed. It's really, really awesome. I know you've shared the slip one. Have you shared the second deck?
It's in the meeting, but did I actually share it?
No, that's fine. I'll just get that from there. I just want to have a little sticky at some of your slides, but that's awesome. Thank you.
Cool, no worries. But yeah, pretty good timing. I usually go over. But yeah, any questions, guys, in the last 2 minutes? Ideas?
That was great.
I know that graphic design is not my thing. I do think of Rich every single time I put a logo or like font.
Yeah, I'm a bit like Rich, to be honest. So if you ever want me to review anyone's deck, just let me know.
Yeah, thank you.
Go in and have a look at those.
I know it's terrible. I'm more about the ideas than I hope. But yeah, thank you. Cool. All right, guys.
Thanks, Kristen. That was great.
Thanks, Kristen. Cool. No, no. Okay. I shall talk to you all in the next team meeting this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. Kristen.
Thank you, Kristen.
Bye.
Bye.